Okay, so we're recording. Go ahead, Aaron, and admit the people in the lobby into the meeting. Then we'll let John start.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to give just another 15 or so seconds. I see some people are still joining the meeting, but we'll get started shortly. Okay, well, let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Boyer. I appreciate the Stakeholder Advisory Group participants' interest in today's webinar, which focuses on hydrologic modeling. I want to mention that this meeting is being recorded. Our goal is today is to prepare you for the upcoming workshop in March by enhancing your understanding of hydrologic models and their role in evaluating interbasin transfer alternatives. We do recognize that some of you are already well versed in hydrologic modeling. However, others may not be as familiar with the terms, the concepts, and application of the models, thus the reason for today's webinar. At the upcoming workshop in March, Sarah Ye and Angie Skangas of HDR will explain how the models have been used to support the Catawba Integrated Water Resources Plan and the Yadkin PD Water Resources Plan. That workshop will be on Friday, March 13th from 10 until 2 at the Rock Hill Operations Center. And there will be a virtual attendance option, but we strongly encourage those to be attending in person. You should have received a formal invitation with a link to attend virtually for me earlier in the week. Alex, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide. I do want to also note that there's going to be additional upcoming workshops and webinars that will cover consolidated alternatives, preliminary analysis of results, and draft environmental impact statements related to those alternatives. We'll provide more information about the potential timing of those workshops and webinars at the March 13th workshop. Today's speakers are Tom Franzen and Alex Matos. Tom is a senior water supply planner and works part-time with Brown and Caldwell as a consultant, also for the North Carolina Rural Water Association. Previously, and for over 35 years, Tom has held various positions with the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality Division of Water Resources, including most recently as the Water Planning Section Chief. Alex is a water quality modeler and a project manager with Brown and Caldwell, and her work focuses on scientific evaluations of human impacts on the environment. Over her 25-year career, she has supported regulatory agencies, local governments, and private sector clients in their decision-making around environmental benefits and impacts. There's just a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover about today's webinar. Again, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the Charlotte Water IBT website for later viewing. You can access that website using the URL charlottewateribt.org. The participants will be muted throughout the webinar today, but the chat feature is available. We prefer that you hold your questions until the end, but if you have a question about the specific content being presented, please feel free to add your question to the chat, and we'll relay them to the speaker at an appropriate time. I'll note some of the questions we may defer until the March workshop when they can be best addressed. If you have any questions that are not related to hydrologic modeling or today's content, we encourage you to submit those to ibtproject@charlottenc.gov. And you can find that also at the charlottewateribt.org website, or you can always email them to me and we'll work to address them. So before Tom and Alex begin their presentation, I'd like to turn it over to Angela Charles, Director of Charlotte Water, for a brief welcome. Angela?
Thank you, John, and good afternoon, everyone. It's been a while since we've had the full group together. Looks like it was spring of 2025, and so we do appreciate you all taking the time to re-engage with us. Since we last connected, we've been busy. Our team has been working hard on our environmental impact statement, completing that work, doing some technical analysis, coordination, reviewing data and also incorporating feedback that we've gotten thus far. And at the same time, the Catawba Water Remanagement Group has been developing the Catawba Basin model. Okay, and this model is a key piece in our environmental impact statement of work. It helps us evaluate how river systems perform under different conditions. It tests future scenarios, and it's a better understanding of the long-term water supply resiliency of the Catawba River. So it's one of the tools that we are using to make informed and responsible decisions. So today's session is about building a shared understanding. And so we're calling it modeling 101. And it's really meant to walk the group through some basics of what a model is, how it works, what it can tell us, what it can't tell us. And so we just want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable with the technical foundation that will be supporting our environmental impact statement. And I'll just say here, you know, Charlotte Water deliberately made the decision to use the Catawba Water Rebasin model. So we didn't want to go out and hire a consultant to come in and do modeling for us. We knew that the Catawba Watery Group was doing this great work. And so we wanted to use the same model that everybody in the Catawba River Basin would be using. So as always, transparency matters to us. And so the more clarity that we have around the tools and assumptions behind the work that we're doing, the better conversations we'll have and better decisions will be made. So I will end with just thank you all for your continued partnership in this effort. And I will turn it back over to the team to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Angela. At this point, I'll turn it back to Tom and Alex for the presentation. Tom?
Thank you, John. We'll get down here to the first slide. Alex and myself, as John mentioned, will be doing kind of a tag team today. I'm going to start off with why we need a model and kind of how models are used in the IBT process. Alex will start getting a little bit more into what is a hydrologic model and using a banking analogy, a water ledger concept to kind of help explain it for those that aren't familiar with it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the fact that we have two different models in the two different basins and a little bit about how then the model or the data is used for making the decision. And as we've already talked about, there will be a workshop coming up. And so Alex is going to try to go over some of the terminology for the workshop so you can understand, be a little bit more prepared for that. Okay, so to kick it off here, why do we need a model, or why are hydrologic models used? When we're talking about natural systems, like we're talking about the hydrologic cycle, and they're influenced by a lot of things like weather, rivers, lakes, water demands, reservoir operations. So models help us to understand how all these factors interact over time and different conditions. Models also allow for safe testing of what if scenarios, such as what happens when demands increase during a drought without having to deal with changing real world or reacting to real world situations. So the next piece is, how is it used in the IBT process? It's important to use it is an important tool, kind of as Angela mentioned. It's critical to the process for the EMC to make their decision. They can balance, understand before and after a proposed transfer, but in benefits versus impacts with some some defensible information to justify the decision. And the statutes do go into not only it's nice to use the model, but the statutes do describe that models will be used. They describe how they will be used. And an important part of that is they will then be also made available to the public. It requires that any models that we use and the data will be made available to the public once it goes out for public comment.
The hydrologic cycle is just the movement of water through our environment. Water evaporates from water surfaces and forms clouds that eventually drop precipitation back to the land or water surfaces. A hydrologic model is representing this process using a mass balance approach. So it's tracking those inputs and outputs, and the change over time is the amount of storage that we have. The models allow us to track the timing of the water movement, and so that provides information on stream inflows and outflows, as well as changes to lake level and water storage. And they let us account for human activities like damming a river to form a reservoir or withdrawing water from key locations. This is a lot like your personal bank account. So your account statement tracks the income that comes into your account, as well as any withdrawals that you've made. And the difference between income and withdrawals over time is the amount of money you have saved in your bank account. The hydrologic models work very similarly. They're tracking those inflows from precipitation, as well as stream inflows or wastewater returns. And they're also tracking the outflows. And those might be due to evaporation, or plant use, dam releases, or withdrawals from the system. And over time, the differences between those inflows and outflows is the amount of water that's stored in the system. Just like your personal bank account can be linked to other accounts or bill pay systems, these hydrologic models allow us to track water across more complex systems like the Catawba watery shown here. So this figure is showing the 11 reservoirs along the main stem of the river, and each of those is operated for hydropower. The hydrologic models let us account for that management for hydropower, as well as drought response plans, water withdrawals, and water returns. Right now, imagine that you own the whole bank and you need to track the income and withdrawals and bank account data for everyone in the watershed. That's kind of the scale. When we come out to the basin scale, that's kind of the scale that we're talking about. Basins are complex networks of tributaries, reservoirs, withdrawals, and returns. And these hydrologic models need to account and track that water movement across the entire basin. You can see from this inset graphic here just how detailed even the small part of this basin is.
Back to me. Okay, as you we talked about, there are going to be two different tools or models, platforms used. GEOPS in the Catawba, Oasis in the Yadkin. They're basically different computational engines that are going to give us the same type of output. One way that I like to think about it is we all have cell phones. Some have iPhones, some have Androids, other variations in there. So basically an Android and an iPhone both make phone calls and they can call each other. When you call, you don't know who has what phone on the other end, but they work fine together. And probably one of the key pieces to using these two platforms are there are basin management groups that have been using these models in the basins. They've also been approved by the state for use. They've been used for federal and state regulatory decisions. And this isn't just something that's happened overnight. They've literally been using these models for decades now. So they really are the the appropriate tool for us to use in this case. If you think about what Alex had talked about, inflows, less the outflows, equals change in your bank account. An important part for all of it, like our bank accounts, how much is coming in. So the inflows on the Catawba, they're actually generated by using a model called waterfall. It's a rainfall runoff. So it uses a variety of historical rainfall, temperature data, land types to create the stream inflows needed for CHEOPS. So if you kind of take a look at the three boxes up there, you've got the waterfall, which is the inflow, or your paycheck. The middle box you can think about as the inputs and information needed to make the decision on, now that I know how much I got, how am I going to use it? Got to pay bills. I'm going to save some. They want to go out on date night or whatever. So that's kind of that decision process. And then the far box, the daily output, is that ledger. It's that we talked about. That's the daily accounting of, now that you've figured out what you got and how you're going to use it, that keeps track of all that information for you so you can make sense out of it later. Just like the Catawba, the Yadkin boxes are really the same thing. The difference being, for inflow data, we use the USGS historical data. It gets adjusted for things like withdrawals and changes in storage, so we don't do double accounting. There's techniques for unengaged areas. So that's your income there. That's the input part of it. The middle box, really, the only difference is, instead of using CHEOPS, it's OASIS. You're using the same types of inputs to make decisions, and then your daily ledger is the same thing. And what kind of helps make this work between the two basins is historical data is used to validate that what's coming out of these models is reasonable and accurate. If you think about that middle box from the previous two slides, this is what this slide's really describing. There's all sorts of information that's needed for the model to make decisions. One that gets a lot of public comments are demand projections. We're fortunate that we've got some recent work done in Catawba that's going to go through 2070. There's been some work done over the Yadkin for Catawba 2075, Yadkin 2070. The statutes also, as part of the modeling requirements, require us to take a look at and use the local water supply plan data. All public water systems submit updated water supply plans every year to the state. Those plans currently go through 2070. So with these data sources, they all project further out than what we need for this process, which is a required 30-year projection, which is to 2060. In addition to the demands, inputs include evaporation rates, evapotranspiration, how much are the plants using, physical information about the reservoir so we can have a stage storage area curve, and probably just as important, so that the model knows how to deal with things from on a daily basis, is the how much hydropower is being generated, especially during droughts. How do operations need to be changed during a drought? So you'll hear us talk about low inflow protocol. That's the drought operations on a hydro project. If you're looking for a water system or like a water supply reservoir, they'll talk about drought operations. Don't get confused in the terms. They both mean this. They're talking about the same thing. What happens when things get dry? So we admit we have two separate models, and it's appropriate because of the way things have developed over time between the basins. They both rely on USGS historical observations to calibrate or really to help create the input, so that we know there's going to be consistency across to be able to use these. There are going to be some logistics to make sure things line up when we do the alternatives analysis, but that that shouldn't be too difficult of a challenge to coordinate when we're working on evaluating alternatives. So now that we have the model and the data, what are we going to do with it? You know, the results we can use for planning. We can use to compare the different options or alternatives. It can be used as part of the regulatory review to make the decisions on the IBTs or other factors. But I think from my viewpoint, for doing this for 40 years, modeling for over 40 years, models inform the decision. They do not make it. I've seen too many times people think that we have the model, we're done. I mean, that's wrong. The model is not the answer. It does not give you, you'll press the button and get the magic answer. They just provide a tool to gain insight to make those decisions.
All right, so now we'll cover some model terminology that'll be useful when we have our workshop in March. The first is model time step, and that's just the frequency that the models are performing these calculations. For both OASIS and KEOPS, we are using a daily time step. And so that means tracking the inputs, the outputs, and the change in storage every day. We'll also talk about data input certainty and accuracy, and that's where we're making sure that the model inputs that Tom walked through are accurate, that we're giving the model accurate information. So for example, HDR spent a lot of effort making sure that the intake elevations were accurate as constructed and not just maybe what was on an older design plan. The USGS gauged flows are also estimates. They're usually considered accurate to within about 10 to 15% and not exact values. Next is model output accuracy, and that's where we're comparing how well the model does in predicting the past. How close is it to our historic observations? For these models, HDR reports that they're within 10 to 15% of our hydrologic observations, which is good for hydrologic models anyway, and is also within the realm of uncertainty for those USGS gauge data. We'll also talk about model predictions relative to natural variability. So for example, on a windy day in a large reservoir, you can get waves that are several inches high. And so if your model is predicting a change of an inch or two, then you can keep that in the context of what's happening naturally anyway. Next are the intake elevations. That's just the water level for each individual intake structure. So if you look at the graphic on the right, the deepest intake is the one that's along the bottom of the reservoir. The shallowest intake is the one that would be exposed first as the water level declines. Then the critical reservoir elevation is the water level that covers that shallowest intake. The target water level is going to be higher than your critical reservoir elevation, and that's the one that the lake operator is trying to maintain. It's a sense of normalcy for the reservoir, and they're going to balance the amount of water they release downstream, considering other factors, including what's coming into the reservoir or what is expected to come into the reservoir in the next week or so. The water surface elevation is just the top of the water, and that's used to quantify the total reservoir storage. So if we look at the graph on the right, the entire shaded blue area is the total reservoir storage. That's from the top of the water to the bottom of the reservoir. Most hydrologic models like the Yadkin focus on the total storage and the change in total storage. The accessible water storage is the amount of water that is sitting above the critical reservoir elevation. So that's the top half or so of the graphic on the right. The Catawba Basin model and the outputs and evaluations are going to focus on that accessible water storage, and that's also called the usable storage. So when we have our workshop in March, we'll just need to keep the difference between the total reservoir storage and the Yadkin from the accessible water storage in the Catawba. We'll also talk about nodes and arcs. Nodes are just specific locations in the system where we're tracking those inputs and outputs. This might be a reservoir or a location where two tributaries come together. An arc is how we move water around the basin. It's a linear feature like a stream or a pipe, and it's designated by the arrows you see here in the graphic on the right. The direction of the water movement is the same as the direction that the arrow is pointing, and the arcs are connecting these nodes so that we can move water around and perform the tracking. Probabilistic forecasting is when we're predicting a future outcome, but rather than predicting a specific value, we talk about a range of values that is likely to happen. So a weather forecaster probably is not going to tell you that you're going to get 3.3 inches of rain tomorrow. They'll probably say something like, there's an 80% chance that you're going to get between 2 and 4 inches of rain. That's probabilistic forecasting. All right, so some key things to remember from today. Models are necessary to represent complex systems, and they help us predict future outcomes. They're just like bank accounts for water. We have 2 basins and 2 models, but they both have similar accounting methods, and they're both tied to that USGS gauge data. Both models have been developed and vetted by large groups of stakeholders. Our next workshop is on March 13th. And if you'd like to review the webinar recordings, these slides, or submit a question or comment, you can do so at charlottewateribt.org. Thank you. John?
Great. Thank you, Alex and Tom. I haven't seen any questions posted to the chat, but if you have any for Alex or Tom about today's content, I'll give everybody an opportunity to post any questions. All right. Seeing none, I think we will wrap it up. Again, before we close, just a reminder, y'all should have received an email invitation on Monday about the workshop coming up on March 13th. We really encourage folks to attend that in person. We'll be providing box launches. If you can't attend in person, there is a virtual link in the invitation so that you can attend remotely. With that, I want to thank you for your time today and look forward to seeing you all in March. Thank you.